Atlanta.
Atlanta, Georgia. I got some friends in Alpharetta.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I think you mentioned that. I'm going to grab one of the books that I was looking at. Just I might as well have it in
Yeah,
my hand. Okay.
that's cool. You'll have the reference point. So we'll get those resources in stores. Today, we're going to be talking about developing and nurturing strong, sensitive leaders to enhance our communities. And when I saw that Adele had that focal point, I thought, one, this is super unique and it's so productive and important because there's a lot of sensitive people in this world, and a lot of them are looked at as being weaker than those who are strong, quote unquote. When in reality, I don't think we could be further from the truth on that. A lot of the sensitive leaders, their delicate or sensitive nature is in fact a big part of the strength of what they're able to contribute. And if you're frustrated, if you're that type of leader who feels like, man, everybody's so sensitive these days, then one of the best things you can do is find a leader who respects, honors, understands, and can help with the nature of sensitive individuals. So I'm excited for us to dive in and talk about that a bit. Adele, before we dive in too far, though, what 3 resources do you recommend for leaders and visionaries out there?
Yes. Well, I have two of the books that I refer to a lot. One is a classic. Um, it's not a leadership book, but everything in here is about leadership. It's a classic, Women Who Run with the Wolves, because it's
Mm,
storytelling from myths and stories around the planet, different cultures, the leadership questions that come up in just being human, um, within ourselves, between people, making choices and decisions. So I like that book a lot. And this one I read recently. Again, it's more of a thought leadership type book. It's called Recapture the Raptor, Rethinking God, Sex, and Death in a World That's Lost Its Mind. It has some
mhm.
really thought provoking ideas for the future of our world, our culture. The nature of leadership needs to change. And I found that intriguing. So those are the two I'm sitting with.
Whoa.
And yeah, and they're big books. So I think everyone will enjoy those.
Absolutely. So you're going to sit with 2.
I'll sit with two. Yeah. I don't
Hey, I
want to
like
overwhelm people.
That's awesome. Oh, well, that's really great. So I have never read either one. I've actually never heard of either one of those. So that's always exciting. And what a great book name, Women Who Run with the Wolves. That's
Mhm.
super, super catchy as well. And I'm very intrigued by the leadership needing to change. And maybe we'll dive into that later in the show. We'll see what we
Sounds
have time
good.
for. We'll be right back, everybody. We'll dive into Adele Wang's vision right after this quick break. All right, welcome in to Vision Pros Live with Jackson Callum. I'm your show host. We will be doing interviews for visionary entrepreneurs and guest leaders who are building fantastic visions out there. Hey, what's up, Vision Pros? Welcome in to another episode of Vision Pros Live. I'm your show host, Jackson Callum, founder and CEO of First Class Business, and I'm super excited to have Adele Wang on the stage today. We're going to be talking about authenticity. We're going to be talking about leadership. Those leaders out there who are, or rather, the people out there who are sensitive in nature are often looked at as people who aren't leaders, and I think that couldn't be further from the truth. A lot of those people are just wise enough to be the last one to talk in a room. It's funny how great leaders talk about that, so predominantly, yet they often don't make space for the people who are quieter in the environment, who are more observers in nature. Again, I'm not going to go too far into that. We'll talk about it with Adele. But before we bring her on stage, we're going to talk about some of these other resources that you can utilize. And these are resources that I believe in and I'm excited about. We're going to start with the Law Spot with Melissa Gray. Melissa Gray came on this show, and I didn't actually want to host her once I found out she was an attorney. I was like, I don't want an attorney on the stage. Most attorneys just condescend. They make me feel uncomfortable. I think a lot of them have supply and demand so far in their favor, they just don't care enough about what you're doing. And as a business owner, you need so much support and help. We went through a $20,000 trademark lawsuit at Restaurant Connect. And we already owned the business name. We spent $20,000 because we did not have great general counsel up front. And had we found the right person, I don't think we would have had to go through that. Then when Apple patented our software, we ran into another challenge. Why do I share this with you? I hope you just get yourself into a position where you can find an entity you're comfortable with before you get into those situations yourself. So I'm hoping to save you from some hassle. Feel free to contact Melissa Gray. Go check out her episode at the least and make sure that you're making wise decisions to protect your brand. Then there's the Healing Institute with Parmelia Param. The Healing Institute is an international wellness community that she's building. And I love how she's bringing all these different practitioners of therapy, of coaching, of different modalities in terms of healing and pulling them together so that it's easy to find who you may want to work with. Everybody's got different styles. Sometimes the coach has all the answers. Sometimes the therapist does. Sometimes you need a different program entirely, some energy healing, something of that nature. I'm not the expert in all that, but I'm super grateful for the expert in her who's decided to build a program where she can pull those types of individuals together. So if you're a practitioner and you want included in that network and database, then feel free to check out what they're doing at Healing Institute. And if you're looking to be a client of somebody of that nature, then you've got a new resource to filter through and see, is the type of person that I want to work with involved in this vision at the Healing Institute. Then we'll talk about the Water Project. The Water Project is something I literally forced to be near and dear to my heart. I'm not going to pretend that I understand anything about what it's like to not have water. I've had it my whole life. I've never had to worry about it. So as I started to meditate on the fact that while there are millions of people who don't have access to even clean drinking water, I need to do something about it. And so we do give and participate with the Water Project. We're not affiliated with them. My hope is that you will also be inspired to share this message with others or perhaps contribute yourself. What I love about their entity is they show you what they're going to do for the communities they serve. And when you donate to a specific community, you get to see the fruits of your labors. You get to see that your donation was put to good use and that sand dam or the borehole well they were creating came to fruition. So if you can give to that, then we would be grateful for it. If you cannot, share it, please. And if there's another cause that's near and dear to your heart and you're like, Jackson, I wish you would talk about this instead, do me a favor. Send us the link in the comments. Tell us about what that is. We might contribute to that too. My friends, we don't have to compete in this world with each other. There's already enough challenges as it is. There's 8 billion people to serve. We can come together and make great things happen for others. And that's really what the show is all about. And we do that by finding visionaries who have excellent stories and figuring out how they're serving this world. Without further ado, I'm honored to bring on Adele Wang. Thank you so much for being with us on Vision Pros today.
Happy to be here.
Well, happy to have you. What's your vision, Adele, for those that you serve?
That's such a deep question. I don't think there's a simple answer because the best questions often have very deep answers. But I think we've gotten so detached from our reason for being here, of how to live in a community, of our sense of purpose, anything that can bring us back to who we are. And I know that's a term that gets described a lot, but it's really more of a feeling than a concept. And so I think if people had more experiences rather than concepts, it would give them more of a guiding post of what we mean when we talk about things like your show and talking about authenticity or being yourself. It's amazing how many people still struggle with what that means because it feels so huge. It feels so abstract, even though the reality is that it's also just as finite as a grain of sand. It's everywhere. And I think it's because it's so big, it's hard for our brains to wrap around. And yet it's also in the smallest of everyday experiences. Isn't that weird?
It's majestic. You reminded me of an experience that I had that I've forgotten that I wanted to figure out a way to duplicate. So there was this PhD of, I don't know, corporate wellness or something like that. Really smart lady. And she had us at this networking event do this game with a tent pole where everybody had to use their fingers to balance this tent pole on their hands and work as a team to lower it down to the ground without letting it. There's a number of rules. It's a very interesting and fun process. And I don't want to ruin that because once you know how it works, you don't get the experience.
Right.
And that's your point. right, there's an experience that unlocks a
Yes.
treasure trove of understanding and depth that you just cannot get from reading the book, that you just cannot get
Mhm.
from the learning of what it like how it looks like or what it's described as feeling. And I was like, man, what if we could create that type of experience
Mhm.
virtually so that more people could participate in that. And so
Yeah.
you're talking about these experiences. I just got distracted because I was like, oh, you're so right.
Yes, I loved your thought about, if we tell people about something too early, they don't get the experience. And I think that's what everyone's yearning for now is I want to have an experience of myself, not so much learning more stuff, but we don't always have the mechanisms or the things in place. Because one thing I always share with all my clients is I don't really care too much about what you know. What I care about is what you're experiencing every day. Because a lot of leaders, I'm sure you've learned, they have so much in their heads already. You know,
We do.
they don't need
I'll throw
to.
myself in there too.
Oh, me too. I mean, plus I geek out. I mean, I kind of like learning about psychology and
Yeah.
the human condition and all these stuff. I mean, I love these books and they go into my head and it's just so fascinating and interesting. Does it actually change my everyday experience? Not sure, but my mind loves to entertain these big ideas. But I think people want to feel more alive more than knowing stuff.
Wow. That's amazing. I do. I'm in. I'm not a woman, but I'm in. So, what's your vision for you, Adele? What do you see for yourself?
Well, I always think that I'm sort of leading myself towards more of me, just like I encourage my clients to do. So I'm always discovering more experiences within myself of what's coming through because I do think we are works in process, meaning it's not like you ever arrive because what seemed to be fine a year ago is now morphing into something else. And there's always the more. And so it's a constant state of reinventing. I think being curious and not knowing is a great place to be because if you're like me, I crave knowing things, and that's always been my Achilles heel because knowing things keeps, in some ways, keeps you from growing because the mind takes
Oh,
over.
absolutely.
So I'm living in a world these days of with more curiosity, just like it's not so much some a friend said it's kind of like the questions will are more useful than the answers. So, an analogy I heard recently that I love, it's like if your questions are keys to a big mansion that has a lot of different rooms with locks in them, and each of these keys unlocks a room. The question is the key, and I love that. Where can these questions lead us? They are keys to something more.
I love that. I just shared that quote with the audience in the comments. The questions are more useful than the answers. I'm a big fan of that as well. There's a parenting guide that I read once, one of the most brilliant parenting guides I've ever read, and it talked about kids between the ages of I think it was 5 and 9 years old. They go through a phase where they want to prove they know things,
Yeah.
and so they start to use that word a lot. And I remembered my childhood with my stepbrother, who, in this sense, he was a bully to me. I was always saying, I know how to do that. I know how to read. And he would, well, read that sign, and so he would test me. And it's what was interesting though is his bullying, so to speak, later becoming one of my best life friends, led me to start to question. And
Mm.
eventually I learned how to stop questioning myself and start to only question, the things I don't like. What do I know? And do I really know it? And
Mm.
I came into harmony with that concept. And it is a liberating feeling to know that you don't have to know it all.
I
I
love it.
know less about oxygen than I know about it, and it's the most important element for like my
Mhm.
everyday survival. And so, if I don't know anything about oxygen, why would I bother claiming that I know everything about everything else in life? It's a discovery.
Mhm.
So, thank you for sharing that.
Mhm. Yeah, and one of the quotes I always share with my clients, especially if they're in leadership, I said there is one phrase that will stop your growth more than anything else, and it's the phrase, "I already know that."
Ah, It is.
Because
Down. I can't talk to that person.
yeah. And so I always encourage people, it's not that you don't know anything,
Right.
but if you can just set aside like I don't know that. You might know a part of it, but someone in front of you is trying to explain some pieces that might be new. And wouldn't it be lovely to learn a little bit more? And, I'm talking to myself. I've had a tendency to jump to conclusions many times. And so I already know that seems to be something that I don't know if it's a compulsion of the brain to just latch on and say, oh, yes, I know that. But if you can set it aside, I have found it really helpful for leaders, really helpful, whether you're talking to staff, a vendor, considering a project, just setting aside, I already know that, and getting back to curiosity.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Well, we're wired for survival.
Mm-hmm.
All species are. And survival means that we have a healthy dose of fear of the unknown, right? So we want to know, and then we want to feel that we're in control.
I love knowing stuff.
Yeah.
That's kind of fun. And not knowing can be delightful because it's a relief to not have to know.
Right.
Can you imagine if we had to know everything? How frustrating that would be? A lifetime of it being expected to know everything. Can you imagine what that would feel like?
I had friends in high school that felt that way. I do remember. I remember the stress they had. I remember the anxiety. I've got a sister who's like that. And no, I've never once I wanted to be. And I used to get compared to with my sister of what you're meant to be like her. You're meant to go to Harvard and do these things. And I was very resilient. And no, I am not that. I am not that. But what I didn't realize was it wasn't even that I was not that. I had no desire to be like that, to have that level of stress, to have that level of anxiety. I knew that was causing that reaction of like, man, you got to control everything.
Yes, the desire to know. And it reminds me of something I was discussing with one of my clients recently because of the way the world is heading right now, with AI coming aboard. I've got quite a few leaders talking to me like, what does this mean? How can we prepare? And I said, it's a little bit like a paradigm shift. So, 10,000 years ago, the rules of life were much more about following the seasons, paying attention to the weather, following the animals and planting things. It was a very physical experience of life.
Yeah.
And then 250 years ago, with the advent of the steam engine and then the computer, the rules of the game changed into knowing things. Like everything was about mastering a skill set of knowledge, of skill.
The information age.
Information and fitting in. I mean, that's the nature of a lot of corporate work. It's the nature of school. There's a process and we fit in. And people have earned a livelihood based on how much they know, whether it's being a lawyer, an accountant, doctor, that you are paid because you know stuff and that you have mastered a skill to produce an outcome. But now with AI coming aboard, the rules are changing again. Wow. Because now, not only are you nobody cares about your bod, and the sun and the weather. Nobody's going to care too much how much you know either, because the bots and the machines can now do all that. So people are going, well, what's left? I'm like, this is such an opportunity for leaders, because what's left is everything that truly matters. That, your creativity, your ability to inspire, to have a vision, to draw people together, to counsel, to, have a creative idea, to follow an impulse, intuition, like all these things cannot be replicated by machines. And so these are also the things that make humans happiest. Like if I could spend all my life in those parts of those energies and less lost in the sauce of having to know stuff, my goodness, because I think humans we were wired to be more in that skill set, out of the box of a system of, how to know things. And so we're in this growth period where people say, well, if I can't earn a livelihood based on what I know, like what's going to happen to me? And I understand there's an anxiety there, understandably so. I think a lot of leadership will change. I think a lot of careers will change. And I think the careers of the future will be for people who lean even more into what we're talking about, whether you call it soft skills or sensitivity, because machines have no sensitivity. They have no ability to empathize or inspire people. But humans can. That's the realm of being human. And then using the machines for all the repetitive stuff that people probably shouldn't be paid to do anyway, because it's, it's there are other things people could be doing.
There's other things they can do.
So leaders are really faced with, what's it like if you're not paid to know things, but you're paid to inspire and share and bring people together, especially in this world now where everybody is remote on their devices and feeling. Did you know that loneliness rates, the data that's coming in, it's pretty obvious. Loneliness rates and depression are through the roof right now.
Right.
We have never seen this kind of stress, and COVID, of course, didn't help.
Nope.
But everyone thinks they're more connected because we've got 5,000 friends on Facebook. But I was sharing with my client this morning. I said, I may have 3,000 friends on Facebook or Instagram, but there was not one person on that list I felt comfortable calling when I needed someone to come over and feed my cat when I flew to Arizona for a summit speaking thing. Like,
wow.
Like something is wrong here when it looks like we know where people go on vacation, we know what they had for lunch, but how connected are we really? The machine, the bot would say, well, why don't you reach out to some of your friends? But they can't feel what I feel. Like, I'm just not really connected to them. There's somebody I met 3 years ago at an event, and now we're friends on Facebook, but would I call them to come over and feed my cat? I don't know. So these are the questions.
I have never been happier to have somebody rant on my podcast. Never.
This is what's happening now.
Well, I've got visionary leaders who come on this show. They have the coolest stories, and they're doing the most amazing things. And you've blown my mind, and that's hard to do. But you've also blown my mind and validated the whole purpose of Vision Pros as well simultaneously. And I'm going to ask a crazy, weird question. If the last era was the information age, what do you call this era?
Great question. To me, there's nothing left but human connection, right? Because what's left? We've got people we got machines, and we can grow our food fine. Half of it can be hydroponic. Information and problem solving, even
right. You got connection and experience. Like, you got me looking at this experience thing too, saying maybe this is the experience age or something.
Age of human experience.
And look at that. Like, we're doing so many different things. My kids have done way more in their life. They've tried different foods. They've been different places. I'm always amazed. Like, man, they've done like everything that I've ever done in my life already by the time they're 10 years old. Like,
yes, there's so much
that's available.
A good thing. It is a good thing. And I noticed the other day when I went to pick up something from the local mall that there were a bunch of teenagers sitting around the water fountain texting each other, but they're sitting right next to each other. I thought, oh my goodness. So they're texting about each other. Like, two will text about the third, I imagine, or maybe they're just talking to each other.
Yeah. It happens in Zoom meetings too. You got a big enough Zoom meeting, a team that's together, then passing notes back and forth. And, it's important to learn as leaders to facilitate a safe place where that's happening in healthy conditions. And also, to try to inspire the team to also be present, and authentic with each other. And I think Patrick Lencioni did the best job of helping me realize how to do that with 5 dysfunctions of a team. That poster behind me is actually all about his program. It's required reading for everybody who comes into our company, because the nature of a culture that is built around authentic, deep connections, accountability, and healthy conflict, you don't learn that in society right now.
We don't.
That's not there. So we're going to switch gears for the sake of the show. I hope we have time to come back, because just brilliant. For the darker side, what's the worst leadership experience that you've ever had?
Oof. Let me count the ways.
Yeah.
Because you're talking to someone who learned the hard way. I was not a fast learner at any of this, even though I sound like it's true. I'm much happier now. But earlier on in my career, I would say behind the curve. And that's why I invested so much in trying to learn. I was very motivated. And now I can honestly say I've got something, to share to people. But I remember being just miserable in a corporate setting And at that time, I really thought the way to succeed was to know things and to work hard. This myth of hard work and competency and knowing. And I was beyond frustrated because I was sitting next to a woman. We shared this cube because there was no space, so I could hear everything she was saying. I had to watch people come in and out of our cube, and I observed the difference between how people responded to her and how they responded to me.
Mm.
And it was like night and day. And I couldn't figure it out. What am I doing wrong? I'm actually doing more work. But this woman had the ability of just attracting a certain kind of attention that had nothing to do with what you know. She was good at like what we're talking about. And I was just frustrated. Every day I'd go home anxious. She got promoted first, all these other things. And, it didn't help the way things were. She wound up dating my boss's boss.
Mm.
So it was already this uncomfortable power dynamic that she's reporting to our boss's boss. Very weird feeling.
Yeah.
So that was probably at my worst because I knew they were talking about me. I remember walking by and hearing them kind of snicker about me. So
Oh,
yeah, it was pretty horrible. So that stands out as what can happen when leadership is not, well, let's just say at the time, I don't think there was a clear explanation of what leadership was. We were told to work hard and be competent, but this woman, she already knew the name of the game before I did. So I was learning about leadership that was not presented in any of the training materials, wasn't presented in the performance review. I couldn't see what I couldn't see. I could only feel the impact, the experience of not being on the side I wanted to be. So I learned a lot from that experience when the real power and leadership is not written down anywhere. Like you can look at an org chart, but that's not how a company
Look, it's like taking a 12-year-old and putting them in an algebra class, or that's appropriate for their age and their level, but they just came out of a third world country and they don't even know how to read and write yet because nobody's helped them do it. And so they can observe, they can see success, they can learn. So they're going to learn way faster in that environment than any other type of environment. But that could very well cause a lot of stress and anxiety. They're not necessarily going to perform like everybody else. And if no leader steps in and helps with the disconnect there, then the only thing you can really expect is a failure to level up to that point. But I think great leaders recognize that there's nothing wrong with that child. There's nothing wrong with the teacher. There's nothing wrong with the environment even. But how do we bridge the gaps that helps everybody appreciate the journey?
Absolutely. And I think this is where leaders are going to have to lean in even more the way the world is moving, because it's going to be less task oriented. And that people kind of sniff at soft skills, but we don't really have good training programs. They're kind of, people roll their eyes at it, like, oh, I went to a reflective listening class once. And like,
they call it woo woo.
Yeah. Like they sniff at, DE&I programs or whatever it is. And because these are so amorphous, they're so difficult to define, and yet they're everything. If you want to talk about a company's culture, how do you build a culture? You could write stuff down, but that doesn't really do anything. It's what people observe and experience with the leaders around them. Are they able to, do they have the stamina to be curious about people from vastly different backgrounds? Or is it a very narrow, like people talk about a good fit, because I was in a hiring capacity at one time and all people wanted was a good fit. But what does that mean? It usually means someone who is more like you, because it's easier. Oh, they think like I do. I like this.
It is. And if you have a narrow offer and a narrow company, that can work pretty well. Right. You can find a certain level of success but it's not for everybody. If you're a coach or a life coach, for instance, like, I hope you're very well open and rounded, unless you're going to super niche down. But Hot Topic comes to mind, the store and the mall. Like you go into that store anywhere in the nation, you're going to see the people who are dressed the same way, have the same type of attitude. And you go into Journeys, like the skateboard store, same thing. Like there's a certain vibe and a reality there, but if you're running a more open-ended company, like a Walmart, like I don't know, a Headspace, there's you then you then need to learn how to correlate with more people, and that DI aspect becomes far
Yes.
more important to cater to.
And
So
yeah, and this is where people typically can't see themselves very well, because I think if you ask most
right.
anyone, everyone sees themselves as, open-minded and caring. And I mean, there are very few people who walk around truly in a malicious or purposely hurting people. That's a very small minority. I think most people see themselves as, oh yeah, people can confide in me, I believe in my people. So the growth process requires going where people don't know. And then, some people are more open to it than
Yeah,
others. Yeah.
absolutely. Somebody who skydives is far more open to that than somebody who never leaves their home.
Yeah.
Right? There's dynamics to it, and anybody you can find the rare exception to argue with it. The point that I think we're both making is it's rather than trying to know, I'm not trying to know it or prove a point as much as I'm exploring it and honoring the reality of questioning,
Yeah.
because I like to make room for that. It's like, okay, I would never have a narrow company. I wouldn't enjoy that process. I like the diversification of thought process. So we build
Mhm.
with more in line with what you're talking about. Let's dive into the best leadership experience. What is the best leadership experience that you've ever had?
Let me try to think. I wish I could say I had a bunch of them, because I've learned my biggest teachers have been from, the School of Hard Knocks, but I have been around people who were just, there was something about them that they were just genuinely personally interested in me. Like, you can always tell when it's sort of written to their job description that they're supposed to mentor their people and
Mhm.
whatever. But there
Sure.
have been a couple of people that stand out that for whatever reason, they were much more interested in me than I expected. Um, and wanted to know how I thought. I had a lot of creativity at that time that I didn't think was very useful. Like, who needs that? Oh my gosh, Adele, we really need that. And so the people who know how to evoke qualities out of staff or whoever they're working with, those are worth a dime a dozen. I mean, that is much more valuable than being able to manage somebody. Like, if you have the ability to bring out someone's greatness through just simple conversation, not that, I mean, you can coach them, but I think it's more of an energy in the field that someone truly believes in you, someone's curious about you, and can pull out qualities in you that you didn't even know. They don't even show up on the performance review, but they see you as a human.
Right.
That's where those people are fabulous.
I love that. You're actually reminding me of I watched a movie about a mathematician named Ramanujan, and he was this prodigy mathematics kid out of India back when, let's just say, civil rights wasn't as far along. And then he ends up going to Oxford or one of those Ivy League or big schools, well, super famous. And they hated the fact that he knew what he knew without any formal training. And they did not want to make him, I think it was called a fellow in that environment. But there's one professor that can eventually let go of his own paradigm of structure and how this has to be, and the fact that he wasn't white, or Caucasian, and is able to finally move into, you know what, I need to stand up for this guy. This guy does have what it takes. He is teaching us new things. And it reminds me of that type of leader you're talking about that may not have had that from the get-go, but that's what's cool about that is it's something that can be learned. It's something we can develop and become if we're willing to. And it's leaders like yourself that are ultimately teaching that and helping people see that that experience is one we can own and have. Before we develop that, I want to make sure we have time for this. If this were the last chance, Adele, that you had to speak about powerful lessons and help the world, what powerful lesson can other visionaries learn from your experience?
Wow. Be curious about everything. And especially if you can develop the ability to stay in your body instead of popping out, that will help a lot. Because my experience has been presence, if we talk about what are these qualities that people are attracted to following, it's not always a title, it's not always an education, or even a personality sometimes, but some people have a an energy field that's much more well, I can, in technical words, it just means they're more in their body and less likely to fly off into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. Meaning they have the stamina. The word is stamina. Can you stay in your body, or does every little thing set you off? Because people who can stay in their body they're like a balm for everybody else. That, oh my God, you know, I just feel so much better around if this person's in the room. The teamwork is better, and they're just sitting there, you know, and that can be built, and that with an open mind, I think will go a long way.
Wow. It's neat how you combine those two dynamics of making sure that and I'm going to go back to the quote real quick, the being curious about everything, but then recognizing to stay in your body. It's funny because I record these quotes as people talk about this particular topic. Because I know how important these quotes are to them. I know how important they're going to be to people who come across and like, wow, that really resonates with me. And what's funny is, as I'm writing that quote, I'm going out of body, right? I'm having to technically write that down, but I'm also simultaneously trying to stay within the present message and receive it for myself and develop my own thought process around it and make sure that I don't allow the technicalities to take away from me what I also could have gotten out of that. And it's a process to learn and develop around that. At 22 years old, I did not have that capability. You know, I was for sure one or the other. And I probably wasn't even very aware about the value of being in the moment at that age. I don't think I got that. Well, I probably got that around 18 or so. But again, these are skill sets that as visionaries we can develop and you can experiment with in order to see, is this an experience that you want for yourself? And I just know that there's a lot of people who don't know what it means to be in your body.
Yeah.
Right. It's so foreign, so woo woo for people that they say, no, like that's not for me. That touchy feely is not for me. And I'm like, why sacrifice that opportunity in life? You know, why prejudge it rather than just at least see what that's like? I couldn't be that way.
Exactly, because there are no words that can convey a feeling, really. I mean, it has to be an experience. Even if someone just gets a glimpse of it for 30 seconds, then they're like, oh, like, yeah, that, whatever you call that. But if they've never had that, you could write a whole book on embodiment and they wouldn't have a clue, you know, because it's the wrong dimension. You know, it's like, so all we can do is encourage people to be curious. I like the word curious because you can't judge anything if you're in the curious state. It's just not really possible to judge and be curious at the same time. So if we're trying to reduce judgment and reactivity, we can be curious.
Yep, absolutely. And you can delay your judgment. You know, it's not always healthy. I mean, if you're close to a cliff's edge, then your judgment can be something that pulls you back from that very fast in a very good way. But you can also overreact and slip and fall off, right? There's certain aspects of that strength that can become a very predominant weakness.
Yeah, I think discernment is different than judging. Discernment is just noticing. Judging has a little bit more of a, is this good or bad? You know, and discernment is the sky's blue, you know. Is blue good or bad? It just is. So so I can be curious, you know, what color is the sky today? And if I see blue, I discern that it's blue versus I discern one day it's gray or the next day it might be pink. But there's no judgment attached with that. It's just noticing because I was curious what color is the sky. So yeah.
You bring up a great point. I would contest, so to speak, in that semantics, you know, are kind of a fun reality of, like, it depends. Did you grow up super religious where judgment was, you know, made you feel awful or did you grow up with a different style of definition? Same applies to love, same applies to almost any word, but that general feeling usually is what I kind of gravitate towards, is like, what was the meaning behind the expression? And
Mhm.
that leads me to, if there's, a couple activities that you could recommend to leaders and visionaries in regards to how do we develop and nurture strong,
Yeah,
sensitive leaders.
yeah.
And we know the byproduct of that is going to enhance communities. It
Mhm.
gives voice, it gives meaning, it gives perspective. But what are some practical ways that leaders can dive into that?
I love anything that's spontaneous, like improv, dance will put you in your body. Like leadership training is probably not going to put people in the most joyous state, but getting them to learn how to do a 3-minute improv monologue with when you have to think on your feet, you're fully in experience.
Wow.
That'll put you in your body, and that is an excellent way to learn how to dance more in the moment when things are going on at the company, and because everything really is an improv these days, you're dancing in the moment.
So
Or
I'm
just,
excited to try this,
yeah.
but for the layman, I'm going to admit fully, I heard what you said. I know where you're leaning, but I'm like, I have no idea what that meant. So do you happen to have like a, this is going to sound so shady if you do have one. Do you happen to have like a lead magnet related to that, or like a guide of like a little
for
mini, here's how to run that type of workshop? Because
for
I
improv,
would love to try that with my team.
yeah. You know, I don't. Yeah, that's a little bit out of my range. Well, I no, I actually have had people in my groups, um, and first they hate it, and then they love it.
Yeah.
So we'll have a group, and I'll say, okay, Sue, pick up your phone, and I want you to sell me on why this phone is amazing. That this phone, you can call Mars with it, and the kinds of conversations you had with the Martian last week, go. And so just the creativity starts to flow, and making up all kinds of stories. And it's a lot of fun, but it uses a different part of the brain.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Yeah, like, oh my gosh, on Mars there's a colony of Martians, and they sit there and they grow all sorts of crops on Mars, and I'm going to get one in the care package next week, and like they're going on, and I'm like, good, because the creativity is flowing, and that's what you'll use next time you've got someone asking you questions for the press, or you're in front of the board, and there's no script. It's not like you can't prepare everything in life. Sometimes
Mm.
you're on. It's prime time and rock and roll. And I've also noticed that people tend to come alive when they practice this. It's like kind of enjoyable. I'm like, yeah,
Mm.
because we're meant to create.
Wow, that's awesome. We
Yeah,
are going to awkwardly stumble through that,
yeah,
and have some fun with it. We've used some more structured style. I guess I shouldn't say structure. They were just more comfortable for me to move
yeah.
things forward in the past. But
I have some examples of me improving on TikTok, being really crazy, but people can say they can feel the energy and go, oh, it's like that. Just
so
go
cool.
really crazy on TikTok, because that's the channel for kind of wacky
That's
stuff.
the channel for crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And people go, oh, yeah. And once one person
Look
is
at you
willing to
go.
do it, yeah, oh, yeah, this kind of stuff. You can
I
do more.
love
Everyone else starts to get inspired. That's what a leader does. Let me go first. Let me hold the energy of being wacky and totally out of my element and just see what happens. And everyone else starts going, you know what? I can do that too. That's leadership.
it.
That's right there is leadership. You're evoking someone's greatness, and you go first without a script, and we dance.
Woo.
Yeah.
That is so cool. I'm super excited about it. So yes, we do karaoke sometimes on Friday.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Yeah, like I said, a little bit more structure for me. Musician, I'm a little bit more my comfort zone as well. So
Mhm.
we do a
Yeah.
meeting called Level Up Calm Down. And we're still there to contribute, but it's more of our break room. We have an hour and a half on Fridays to where we really just get to know each other. And sometimes, because everybody speaks Spanish, not everybody, but 99% of our people speak Spanish, we studied out the words and the languages, and they'll be like, and I'm the gringo in that environment, right? I don't know it perfectly. And
Mhm.
they'll be like, oh, Jackson, understand that. And I'll be like, hold on one second. From Peru, did you understand that? And they're like, nope. And I'm like, okay, so there's different words and different
Yeah.
cultures, and so we
Yeah.
have a lot of fun making space for that. But I like this idea of getting far more creative, really breaking the shells open,
Mhm.
because yeah, once you can't even describe, it's indescribable, the connection that occurs
Yeah,
once you
and
have shared experience.
little kids used to do this naturally. When they'd play with each other in the neighborhood or make friends with a new kid on the
Yes.
block, and they were so in the moment. I don't know.
Yes.
Maybe we need to take a team to the beach and have them build sand castles or something. I don't know, but
You're right,
just
though.
turning on that circuit again can be really useful.
Like, hey, let's play with the dinosaurs and then the soldiers, and let's
Yeah.
play home, and then the dinosaur will be the wife, and what, like, yes, you do all sorts of weird things as a kid, and you find yourself laughing, you find yourself learning, you find yourself creating things that make no sense to anybody else, but it matters to you and the people you belong with. That's so cool.
Yeah.
So, visionaries and leaders out there, did you learn? Some of you are going to say you didn't learn a thing. Some of you are like, oh, you're just nuts. That's okay. You can feel
Totally
that way.
fine.
The ones who get it, though, and you go and you practice these things, you are going to create a little bit of disruption, in your company. But is disruption a bad thing? No, in fact, you have to. A disruption happens every day anyway. But usually it comes in the form of negativity. Usually it comes in the form of like, oh, now what happened with the presidents? Oh, now what happened with X, Y, or Z? This is controlling the form. Ultimately, you're gaining more control by letting go and diving in. This is so cool. Thank you for this, Adele. That was awesome.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Vision Pros, we're going to have some action steps, ways you can get in touch with Adele. If you can feel the power and value of extending this for your brand and really just imagine how your company would be if everybody in your company was happy. Right? Just imagine what would feel like if people wanted to come to work because things like this were going to happen. What would happen to the results? What the energy would be like for your prospects and your clients. So we'll have those action steps in there. And I hope that you take that ambitious, courageous feeling and you also decide to click the button at the top that says be our guest. If you have a vision of helping the world, and whether it's helping the leaders who are sensitive in nature and delicate, whether it's helping people in your neighborhood, or it's something you're trying to get people to Mars to talk to those Martians that Adele talked about, and you're on the Elon Musk track record, whatever your vision is, it's not about the size, it's about the authenticity. That's what we want in the show. So feel free to join us in the show. And Adele, thanks for joining us on Vision Pros Live. We'll
Thank
see
you for
everybody
having me. Thank
in the
you.
next episode. Thank you. Thank you for being here today. I'm really happy that you tuned in to Vision Pros Live. I'm looking forward to seeing your reactions as these episodes continue to move forward. This is going to get more and more fun. We'll have more and more engagement as well. We'll invite people to participate in the show. And thank you for giving us your time and attention. Have an excellent